Welcome, everyone. I'm Jamie Flinchbaugh, host of People Solve Problems, and today we have as a special guest Rick Pedersen. Rick, how you doing?
I'm doing well, Jamie. I thank you very much for inviting me. I look forward to having our chat.
Yep, our chat. We've had many chats over the decades that we've known each other. Rick is founder of Old Norse Consulting. He's also leading the Lean Product and Process Development Boot Camp, immersive workshop, teaches principles and practices of lean product development. Been a long time practitioner of continuous improvement across all functions. Very passionate about helping people improve their organization, and those that work with you would not challenge the word passionate. You are indeed passionate about what you do. So glad we can share some of that passion and insight with our listeners. So we're going to talk about product development. This is part of your new workshop, your new boot camp that you're launching is lean product development. And I just want to start with, why isn't problem solving and improvement, process development, why are those things different in product development than in other processes?
Yeah. So in very broad terms, if you go out to any business, particularly in business processes, but also in manufacturing, most of the things that people are doing outside of product development, outside of the development side of things, whether it's process or products, they tend to be very transactional processes. It's you can define what the process is, you can write it down as a procedure on paper, electronically. And as long as people understand how to do the process, it's a well-designed process, you're going to get good results. Product development is different because so much of it is designed or built around building knowledge. The idea is that we've got to figure out how to solve problems without having the knowledge we need to do so. So it's really around how do I develop defining what the problems are, what the knowledge gaps are that we have to figure out, and then doing the work to figure out what that is. And it can be everything from how do I achieve a certain feature? How do I solve a quality problem? How do I design a particular manufacturing process? Any of those things are very much more iterative. It's also very hard to define a time bound around those. And, I can't tell you how long it's going to take me to solve a problem that I've never solved before. It's almost impossible. You could say, all right, I want you to solve this in 2 weeks, but chances are it's not going to be 2 weeks. It could be 2 hours. It could be 2 months. We just don't know.
That's very interesting. And I like to say that all problem solving is closing knowledge gaps because even if it's not brand new knowledge, it's the application of the knowledge or the combination of knowledge that comes together. So let's just talk about knowledge gaps a little bit. Are we talking about innovation knowledge gaps, or is a reconfiguration also a knowledge gap? What breadth of flavors does the term knowledge gaps in this context apply to?
Yeah. So typically the way I define a knowledge gap is somewhat binary in that if it's knowledge, let's say I've got a design team and we run into a decision we have to make, we don't have the knowledge. We define that as a knowledge gap. But if I can go and I can look that up, I can Google it, I can use AI, I can go talk to somebody who's an expert, and I can get the answer, so to speak, pretty quickly, then I tend not to encourage people to manage those as knowledge gaps. That's just knowledge I need to go look up, right? That's information I need to go find.
Mm-hmm.
What I typically define as a knowledge gap is I can't just go look this up. I can't Google it. I can't go to a reference manual. I can't go talk to, my knowledge expert around whatever that system is or whatever that problem is. I have to actually go do work to figure that out, right? I have to build prototypes. I have to do testing. I have to run simulation, whatever those things are. I have to actually go invest time and in some cases money into figuring out that piece of knowledge that I need. So that's what I've used as a differentiation, because I've had teams that will put down everything in the kitchen sink as knowledge gaps, and they kind of get lost in all of the different things, and spend time working on something when, hey guys, you could have looked this up. This is common knowledge, so to speak, right? It's not knowledge you have in your hand, but I can quickly go look it up. So that's kind of the differentiation I've used.
That's good. So, some of that, at least in simple terms, assumes a bit of a binary state, right? Which is either I don't know or I can look it up, right? I know or I can find it. But in the middle of that equation is this thing called certainty or uncertainty. I think I know, I don't know what I don't know, right? So how does uncertainty affect that sort of big fork in the road of, am I pursuing a knowledge gap or not, and how do I manage that uncertainty?
Yeah. So what I've had teams do is go ahead, if they're not sure, it's something they can go look up, or as you said, there is some uncertainty, document it as a knowledge gap, and then quickly do the check to see, is this something that we know, that we can quickly answer, that we have the expert, or I can Google it, or whatever that situation is. So don't offhand ignore it or dismiss it as something, because in some cases it ends up being a knowledge gap. But quickly filter through that and make sure that it is something that that you think is, that we are certain we have that information.
Yeah. Okay. So returning to sort of lean product development as a whole, in lean manufacturing, a lot is made of the idea of flow, right?
Mm-hmm.
We want material to flow, and everything is in service of that. And that's one take. It's a central take, but it's one take. So flow is the centerpiece of all improvement in some ways. Are knowledge gaps the centerpiece of all improvement in product development, or is it something else? How do you think about the hierarchy of improving product development?
Yep. So I think that the development of knowledge is the lifeblood of product development. It's the value add. In other words, I can remember early on when I started working with engineers and in product development and talking about value add. You can't apply the same logic of, are we changing it or are we modifying it, et cetera. It's not a material thing, right? Like we do in manufacturing, we look at, are we changing the material? Things like that. That's the value add test, I guess you'd say. In product development, it actually took a while. What I slowly came around to is the value add is creating new knowledge and reuse, that's reusable. That's something we can carry forward. And so that ends up being the value add in the system. The flow, I guess you'd say, is how are we identifying those knowledge gaps? Doing the work to managing those knowledge gaps. In other words, doing the work to close those knowledge gaps, and then documenting those knowledge gaps so that we can reuse that knowledge. It's sort of like compound interest, the analogy I use. If I create knowledge, if I solve a problem, I had to create some sort of knowledge or gain some sort of knowledge in product development. If I'm not documenting that and then reusing it, it's like I made 50 cents. And instead of putting it in the bank and allowing that 50 cents to compound over time, build more knowledge, create better products, I just go kind of spend that or discard that 50 cents and I don't have anything. And that's what we often see teams do, is they gain knowledge, but we don't take the time to document it so that we can reuse it. And we end up resolving problems over. And I think that's a big waste in our organization, is solving a problem, creating knowledge, but we lose that knowledge. Next project, we forget we actually solved that problem in the past.
Right. So that's a big sort of shift in I'll say what the work is, right? What we're working on. We're working on knowledge gaps, either procuring and applying existing knowledge or closing knowledge gaps. So that's a lot about what the work is, what's important. what about how the work is done? Um, does that simply serve, whatever helps close knowledge gaps as fair game, or I are there vastly different ways of working that serve that need best?
Yeah. So traditionally, project teams would be very task oriented, action register and issue. They have an action register and an issues list. So issues, things that, those are the kind of the problems that come up, things that occur. And then they would have their action register, yes, action register or their project plan. And they're very task oriented in that they've already scheduled out the tasks that need to occur. And so what I challenge them is to reorient their definition of the tasks and issues around the knowledge gaps that have to be closed. What's the work that's required to close the knowledge gap? Because that's the ultimate value add that we want to build or create and carry forward in a project to help us make better decisions. And so one of the things that I've worked with teams on doing is utilizing, there's multiple terms for it, fast learning loops, fast learning cycles, things that are where you turn that problem solving, that knowledge building crank as quickly as possible to build those cycles of identifying the knowledge gap, doing the work that ultimately creates the knowledge, and then being able to make that decision. So it is a mindset shift from I just need to get these tasks done to why are we doing those tasks? What's the ultimate goal, which is to build knowledge?
Yeah. Excellent. So as we think about how to execute all that, right, the service of those knowledge gaps, just like in manufacturing, Toyota stands out as an example. And of course, there's books about Toyota's product development system. Is this about copying Toyota's product development system, or why not?
No, I don't. I think I'm a big believer, and it's part of what you've coached me for years, which is we really need to understand the thinking behind why Toyota, Danaher, all these companies, why does a company do or have a certain tool or behave a certain way? Why are they doing that? What problem or benefit did it provide for them? And how can we take that knowledge about, the thinking and apply it to our unique situation in that company? So I think there are many things that we can go learn about how Toyota does product development, or Apple, or whoever it is, but don't just grab that tool, come back and implement it exactly the way Toyota does it, or whoever it is. I think you really have to understand the thinking behind it, the behaviors that support it, etc., for you to be successful in solving whatever the problems are within your product development system. You may have, it takes us too long to develop products. It takes us too many resources. We have too many problems at the end of our projects, that bite us. Whatever those situations are, go and learn about what these companies do, but don't just grab it and apply it as is. Tailor it to what your situation is.
Yeah. So as far as learning those techniques, so we don't want to copy them and apply them without thinking about them, but
Yep.
they're still useful to learn from.
Yeah.
So what are a couple of the best techniques or tools that somebody should start their learning from?
Yep. So I think I've always the way I've learned and I've helped other teams learn is first find some good references that you can learn and understand from. Books books to read, courses that you can take, just to give you an idea of what are some of the things people are doing, what are some of the tools and philosophies and ideas. Then come back and start to experiment within your organization on using those tools, those ideas, those concepts. I'm a big fan of, hey, let's pick a small team and maybe a project, if it's in product development, and let's give these guys some new thinking, some new methods, and then coach them along the way to do things differently. I don't think it's hard. I'll say it this way. It's very hard to decide we're going to change our whole organization from one way to another.
Yeah.
It's really, really hard. Even if, and I've been through this in two companies now, two large companies, even if we decide we're going to redesign our product development system, incorporating, excuse me, incorporating lean concepts. Got me all choked up. So as I was saying, even if you're going to holistically change your product development system, rolling it out takes much more planning. Only pick only pick one or two projects to begin learning and experimenting, because no matter what you design, you're gonna have problems with it. You can never assume that what you designed is perfect and ready to go. So definitely pick small areas to begin with, a project to pilot it on, or at least to kick off. Here's our first project, our first couple projects. Let's get them going, and let's have them learn, and we observe how are things going, what problems are you running into, because they're going to run into problems, always do.
Yeah, and whether it's in manufacturing or finance or product development, there's a lot of lessons when you're picking model areas or learning labs or spaces to experiment in. They need to be like your important work enough that they're relevant, right? If it's too much off on the fringe, nobody will pay attention to, but not so central that you're afraid to experiment with. And so picking the right model areas is important. And I think the other thing you said is a couple, right? So picking a couple, because you never know when one you get started and all of a sudden, oh, we're not doing that anymore, right? It's just all of a sudden it doesn't exist. So
yeah. Which actually honestly happened in the last company I was with. The first project we were going to kick off, they ended up because we learned early on that we didn't know that we didn't have enough understanding of the technology. We actually paused the project and sent it back to R&D and said, which we wouldn't have done in the past, right? Really plowed through and ended up with a project that drug on forever. But we knew enough that we said, wait a minute, this isn't our new process. We're not just going to plow through this. Let's pause it. And we picked a couple other projects and started those. So the system ultimately worked exactly the way we wanted it to. It was just interesting to learn that on the very first project.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's both surprisingly good and surprisingly bad things will happen. You don't always get control when they do. So sometimes it's the very first try.
Yeah.
Hit your first golf ball right down the fairway or into your shins.
Yes, exactly.
So just a couple minutes left. Let's talk about your workshop a little bit. So most learning happens through that experimentation, but you got to start somewhere. I have a whole shelf, a whole shelf behind me on my bookshelf is dedicated to product development books. So you can do that, but you've developed a immersive workshop called LPBD Bootcamp to learn some of these ideas. So we won't really have time to go through what's all in the boot camp, but why is that environment the best way to learn what this is all about?
So I think it's two primary reasons. One is a product development. So I can go out in manufacturing and I can make changes in manufacturing, or in any ops environment. And because the cycle times are typically pretty fast, seconds, minutes, days, I can learn how my changes are performing, and I can see results pretty quickly, and I can adjust, right? So we can turn that problem-solving crank pretty quickly and learn as we're going through and doing it. Product development is a years-long endeavor. All right, I'll start a product development project, and it may be 18 months, 2 years, 3 years before I actually see the results of it and can go back and look at measure. Now, there are things that occur in the middle where I can see, are these things improving? So that's the first reason that we wanted to do this course. Was it allows people to run a product development project, including redesigning a manufacturing system, within a 1 week time frame. Shorter than a 1 week time frame. So I can get the experience of seeing all the different improvements that we're planning on doing or would like to do in our product development system. I can see those, how they interact with each other and what the benefits are within that class. The second is it provides an opportunity, particularly if we're doing it for whether we're doing it for different companies in one class or we're doing it for one company, that's running the class. It gives them an opportunity to see how do their people interact? How do we build a more cross-functional product development environment, and run that system before they're actually put in, given the task of, okay, now you're gonna be on a cross-functional product development team.
Mhm.
So they can relate back to things that happened in our class and go, hey, you guys remember on day 3 when we were doing XYZ? This is what we want to do in the real world. It allows them to check when they're in the real world running their project, go back and go, hey guys, are we running the integration event the way it was taught to us, the way we intended for it to be designed? And it provides the opportunity for for the folks on the project team to kind of check each other. Are we doing the behaviors that we were using back in the class, things like
Mhm.
that.
Yeah.
So it gives them an opportunity to, I don't want to say test drive, that's not the right word, but to experience the new product development system, the tools, the techniques, the behaviors in a very condensed manner before they actually have to go do it in the real world.
Yeah. Fantastic. Well, thanks for sharing that. And as many companies know, if you don't develop products that people want, there's no sense manufacturing them efficiently. So
Always.
it's a pretty key set of functions, capabilities. So thanks for sharing your insights to our listeners.
Thank you very much, Jamie, for having me.